but I'm here and I'm listening. So it's like, if we want to actually start, that's cool.
All right, sweet. Does anybody have any questions specifically for Tori to get us started?
I didn't know it was a Tori call.
I know. I think the reminders are, I think they put that out last week, and then it's actually the second Monday of every month. And I literally have it written on my calendar so I don't forget, because if not, I'm always saying the wrong time.
I was just happy to be able to get on the call today. I feel like I missed you guys.
I know you've been busy. And I feel like we also haven't had many movement calls in the past few weeks either.
Oh, hang on a minute.
Yeah.
Can you still hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Oh.
Because Julie, you're doing work with Tori too,
You guys
right?
hear me? You're all frozen.
Yeah.
Yay!
Yeah, I actually have a call with her tomorrow. So.
Oh, perfect.
Yes, you do.
Yeah, I do.
It's double.
Double doses, they're the best. You guys did cut out for a little while, so if somebody did ask me something, I didn't hear it.
No, we didn't, because you kept asking, can you hear me?
Oh, sorry.
So no, that's okay. We just wanted to make sure that you could hear us, because we could hear you the whole time.
Yes, that was good call on your part.
Yes.
Oh my goodness. Oh.
I guess my one question would be, like, in the order of the stuff that I'm doing, it's like, should I be doing the bank exercises first and then go to my workout and then do the walking, or should I do walking, then the exercises, and then the workout? Because I don't know which would be best, because I don't know if the walking would warm me up or if the bank exercises would stretch me or what. So I guess that's my question.
Oh, it's a very good question. And the answer is it doesn't matter.
Okay. Well, that's good.
So, and what I mean by, and I shouldn't say it doesn't matter. I should say there's a probably better way of saying that would be, the more varied you can make it, the better it's going to work.
Okay.
Yes. So in this instance, consistency is not your friend. Sameness is not your friend. Because what we are trying to do is to get the body adapt to movement. What we don't want it to do is to get it to adapt to specific movement at specific times, consistently the same. What we want it to do is to not know what's coming and to be okay with that.
Okay, so I can switch it up. So like today, it's like I got all the way to work and forgot my phone.
Yep.
So I had to drive all the way back home, and it was pointless for me to try and go back and make it to the fitness center. So I just went downstairs and all I did was the bank exercises. So I knew I would get my half-hour walking in throughout the day, because I take breaks and then during my lunch. And so now all I have left to do is just the workout. So switching it up is a good thing then. Okay.
Yes, switching it up is a good thing, as long as all, like, if all the boxes get ticked, it does not matter what order you do them in, and it actually helps your body out if you don't do them in the same order all the time.
Okay, good to know.
There you go. That's the best part about this stuff, is that it literally works better when you just make a big mess out of it.
That's a good question.
It's also one of the reasons why it works really well if you're new to fitness, or if you're new to moving consistently, that you're doing it this way, because it helps you mentally kind of ease into the structure without it needing to be super structured, if that makes sense. And it helps you get out of that like all or nothing mentality, because it's just not, it's not a thing.
Right. Right. Well, and the nice thing is like some days, you know, my body is more stiff than others. So it's like some days, you know, doing the stretching and the bank exercises first is easier for me than it is for me to do the half-hour walk like I normally do.
Right.
So
right. Yeah. And that
makes me feel better, because I was feeling a little guilty for not getting everything all in like I normally do. And so
nope.
That's a good thing. I'm glad I asked the question.
Good. Well, you know what?
I kind of have a question for you.
Go for it.
Okay. Hopefully my internet doesn't cut out. But so when somebody's going from strength training to your training,
Yes.
Can they continue doing both, or are they supposed to stop one altogether and do yours? And then when they resume the other strength?
This is an excellent question. Okay, so the answer is it depends. Like so many things when you ask me, it depends. So what it depends on is what they are coming to me for. So first thing we have to determine is whether or not the thing that they were doing was part of the reason that they ended up needing to come to me in the first place. So was what they were doing an appropriate stimulus or not? And sometimes that answer is not clear. Like sometimes it's very clear. Sometimes it's like, who the heck knows? We're going to do some experiments and find out. And so that's the first thing we need to figure out. Is it part of the problem or not? If it isn't part of the problem, meaning they had this issue prior to whatever strength training they were doing, or they've been doing the strength, like doing something like what they were doing for a really long time, and the two don't seem to be related. It depends on it. It then depends on how is their body responding to the strength training. Like, for instance, if someone was a seasoned CrossFitter, had been CrossFitting for a really long time, did it in a healthy way, all the perfect bubbles, you know, ding, ding, ding. And they, you know, let's say they were working out one day and they, you know, like the kettlebell like fell on their foot or something crazy and they injured themselves. And then when they were coming back from that injury, they're just having foot pain. They can't figure out the foot pain. And that's what they end up coming to me for. We know the CrossFit isn't a problem, like long-term. However, the foot pain is an issue that isn't going away. It's kind of gotten itself into a loop. At that point, we may pause the CrossFit to figure out if the loop is because it's just too much of a stressor right that second on the nervous system, or if it's a complete like non-relevant thing. Like if we pause the CrossFit and we try to give the foot like different ways of moving, different ways of functioning, and the pain stimulus doesn't change or the way it's presenting doesn't change, I might think of it as like, okay, this really isn't a factor, in which case, CrossFit if you want to CrossFit, with the exception of like, don't do anything that makes foot hurt. And we'll experiment on other things as far as like what to do for your foot. If it is a factor, then we need to then figure out how much of a factor is it. Like, is it what's actually causing the issue, or is it like a secondary, it's causing secondary symptoms? It's the beginning of like we're going to start hunting through the weeds and figure out get down into the nitty gritty of why the body is sending this signal, if that makes sense. So I might have them pause it. I might have them stop it completely. I might have them keep doing it, and we add in the resets and see what happens. And I might do one of those three and then say, we may not stay here. This may only be something we do for a short period of time just to see what happens. Because a lot of what we're doing in the beginning is trying to investigate why the body is throwing that signal. And there's often more than one reason. And that means that we have to pull apart the different potential. It just, I mean, it depends.
Yeah. That makes sense.
Yeah, like it also depends on like how complicated of an issue is this? Is this like happening on for the last 20 years? The time that chronic pain issue is going to be a pain loop, meaning that the nervous system's gotten into a cycle that it can't get out of. And we've got to figure out why. That short-term issue is probably going to be much more simple to unravel. Is that somewhat helpful, or was that just a lot of rambling?
No, it was helpful.
Okay.
Tabby's chatting that she lost the sound, so she can't hear anything.
Is it me that you can't hear, or is it Tabby that you can't hear?
I don't think
or
she
Tabby
can hear
hear
anybody.
Oh.
Oh, and then Kristen wrote that she's hearing some choppiness and semi-robot. So.
Can she still not hear anybody?
Are you still not able to hear Tabby? Let me check. Oh, Kristen wrote she can hear now.
I can hear now too. It stopped for a little
Oh,
while, but now
okay,
I can.
cool.
Yay.
Yay.
Woohoo. Ah, I'm making you guys fall all over my kitchen.
I don't think Tabby's in. Are you here, Tabby? Can't hear anything. She's gonna go out, I guess, and then come back. So Tori, kind of going back to that other question. So when they do start, so if they did take a break from their programming and they're going back into the programming,
Yes, ma'am.
do they have to go in slowly? Do they have to, I don't know, modify, or is it that's a different?
So it depends on the things that we talked about earlier, but generally speaking, I will suggest that they go in fairly slowly, and usually what I call sandwiching, which is basically we're going to sandwich or hybrid the resets with whatever training you're doing. And depending on if they're a strength trainer, if they're doing CrossFit, or if they're doing, running, if they're cycling, whatever it is. We're going to start slow, but we're also going to start by having pretty consistent check-ins with the body. So we're going to refocus with the nervous system resets that we've been practicing and see what the body tells us. So part of the reason why I stress to you guys that those resets or like the recovery work that we do is so important is that part of what you're doing is building a safe foundation or a safe base of movement for your body to go back to. So when we start introducing a higher level of stress, i.e. a higher level of activity, being able to go back to home base periodically and check in with the body so that you can remind the nervous system that it's safe and that it's capable is extremely helpful. Especially because when you first go back, there's an element to that that's an unknown, or there could be an element to that that is fearful because previously you got hurt doing that thing. So being able to have that home base of movement that you can go back to, you can check on and do your system check using your recovery work and go like, oh, I'm actually fine, is really helpful. It helps the nervous system not freak out and throw a much bigger signal at you than you actually need. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's one of the reasons why I'm like, I stress the consistency, but also like the do them whenever.
So what is the difference between bank and reset?
So so the sprinkle bank is filled with resets.
Oh, okay.
But I use the resets other places. I say resets because that's how I was taught to label them. I would say a more accurate term is probably recovery care, but it depends on what system you follow, if I'm being really honest. And I've learned multiples of them, and a lot of them use a lot of the same movements. They just call them different things. And so like recovery movement is probably a more encompassing term. But I'm used to calling them resets because I relate the most to the original strength way of teaching them. And having people use them, but they are most definitely not the people that came up with them. These are all movements that like your body does and you will do through your stages of development, which is why it's called original strength. But lots of movement rehabilitation programs utilize these movements. They all call them something different. It's very confusing. It's the same things, but they call them different things. and so I prefer the way that Tim teaches them, the guy that runs Original Strength. I like the way that he introduces people to them. I like the way he teaches them. And so while I have done multiple trainings with different programs, I like his the best. And I converse the most with his alumni. So I use those terms the most. So it's like in my brain already, that's what I call them. But a more encompassing term for the movements would probably be like recovery movement or recovery care, because we're tapping into the rest and restore recovery system. We're trying to turn that on as much as possible, that safety system for the nervous system, so that it stops freaking out. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that sandwiching technique, like I said, it'll look different depending on what activity that you're doing. But that's basically what it is. You're giving yourself a chance to pause in that higher stress spike of activity and reminding yourself that you're safe and that everything's okay. And a lot of times that's all your nervous system needs. It just needs a little break. It needs you to check in with it. And then it's like, oh, okay, we're okay. Off we go. And the other thing is too, often going back into activity after you've done a lot of the recovery work is probably going to feel different. And so sometimes that different feels unstable. It's not unstable, but it feels that way because you were so used to the amount of tension that was in your body. So that's the other reason we start slower, is to make sure that you feel safe, you feel comfortable, you feel balanced, and that everything is functioning the way that it should. Any
Right.
other
I don't know what
questions?
keeps happening, but I keep cutting in
But
and
you're
out. So
here.
I'm listening. I'm just like trying to, I don't know. I updated my watch and I feel like it keeps cutting things in and out. So like sound completely goes. So I've heard most of what everybody said, but I'm sorry if I missed some of it. I'm like, okay, did anyone go silent or was that just me? It was just
No,
me.
you're good. Oh, Marlena, I thought of another part to that question. Okay, so the other part to that question that you should have asked, but you didn't because you didn't know to ask it, is when they are reintroducing that activity, what planes of motion get reintroduced first? And the reason why that's important is your body has a hierarchy of planes of motion that it likes. So if you introduce the least, how do you want to say it? If you introduce the one that is supposed to be at the bottom of the tier first, you will end up getting a little higgly piggly and it won't feel safe to your nervous system. So if you stack it appropriately, your nervous system stays happy longer. And that really applies to anything that has multiple planes of motion. So like sport or strength training or, boot camp, any of those kind of things. If you're going back to a single activity sport like running, cycling, swimming, something where you do one thing for a really long period of time, or like that's the only thing that you're doing, you're not doing anything dynamic, obviously you're introducing that. But if you're going into anything that's dynamic in nature, then the order you introduce those planes of those movements planes matters. Does anybody know what the movement planes are? I probably should have started with that.
No.
Okay, cool. They're actually, okay. Tabby knows. I know Tabby knows, but she's being quiet. All right. So the important ones for the sake of this conversation are cross-lateral, which is your diagonal gait pattern. So that's opposite hip to opposite shoulder or opposite foot to opposite hand. That's your gait pattern. That's the one that the nervous system likes the most, that makes it the happiest. That's your happy pattern. Unilateral means one side of the body, or one limb of the body, depending on what you're doing. And then bilateral, meaning two stationary limbs. You're using the whole body together in one, like almost like block plane of motion. Does that make sense? So that would be like your squats, your deadlifts, I just lost it. I don't know. Other things that you move all together. Who knows? But point being, those are kind of the three that are the most important as far as your nervous system is concerned. And that is kind of the order that we will reintroduce things. The other reason we introduce things that way is that you can get the most power out of that bilateral plane of motion, which means that it's going to feel the least safe to the nervous system because you can produce the most power out of it, which also means you can hurt yourself the easiest doing that to the nervous system. Like as far as the body's concerned, that's the one that's most dangerous because that's the one you can lift the heaviest, you can throw the most, like that's the one that produces that huge amount of like push. Does that make sense? Even when you're not actually pushing anything. So we always introduce that one last, and also it requires you to be very well balanced. So the other two kind of check your balance, or like they help your balance along. That last one, you've got to be really well balanced in order for it to, and for everything to kind of stay where it's supposed to stay and do what it's supposed to do. So there, not that you really needed all of that information, Marlena, but that's where my brain went. So that's what you got.
Sorry, didn't mean to be quiet. I just was afraid I'd get cut off again. So basically what you're saying, Tori, like if you're doing both like those exercises and strength training, that like getting back into it, it's better to start in like unilateral, and you said what is that, contralateral, I think is when it's like opposite sides of the body, to kind of work on that stabilization and the balance, so that when you do go into some of these heavier things, it's like your nervous system is kind of already like set and in a good spot to be able to produce like the force.
It's able, right. It's in a good place to be able to produce balanced force. So,
okay, balance force.
So the other thing you have to remember is too, like, even though we call it bilateral, it's still a spiral of momentum. So
Bilateral
still,
would be like squats, like if you're doing a
correct.
squat.
Squats, deadlifts, anything where your feet are stationary and you are propelling force through the whole
with like
body.
both sides.
Yeah, both sides, exactly. So it's still, force production is still happening in a spiral, which means that what those first two planes of motion are doing is that it's helping the nervous system prime the body to sync. Does that make sense? So it's learning how to synchronize force production, so that by the time it gets to that bilateral production, it all's functioning together.
Okay. Yes.
Which is frustrating. It's frustrating because those are actually more simple to learn. So it's common for personal trainers or for people to start with those movements and then have huge issues with them down the line because they're so unbalanced. And that's usually why, because it's not actually the plane of motion that your nervous system's going to like the most and help you out with the most. You start the other way around, everybody is much happier. But it's, unless you are, the only time that you would notice this and like, oh, look, this all worked perfectly, is if you watch actual like developmental stages, like a baby, if you watch that developmental process and that human never has a period where it has to be sedentary, it will naturally progress that way. Like there isn't a period where all of a sudden a baby that is like just learning to stand is going to be like, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to pick that up. I'm going to squat down, pick that object up and stand right up. Like there's always a little stagger stance for a little while. There's always a little bit of like a half crawl, half get up. Like they know instinctively to move their body in diagonal patterns in order to get force production that they want, because their objective is always goal oriented, meaning they're not thinking about this like, I'm going to make my butt look awesome because I'm going to do all these squats. They are looking at this like, I want to be over there and I'm over here now. How can I get from A to B? When you produce movement as a result of that goal-oriented thought process, your body will figure it out, and it's going to figure out how to get there. Does that make sense? And rarely will it pick the thing that it deems the most dangerous. Does that make sense? Some people will call it like that's your primal movement training, and if you want to call it that, I guess you can. But but really, it's just, that's the way your body was designed to function with your nervous system. It was designed to function with like environmental goal-oriented instructions. I don't know how else to say that. It doesn't mean that we can't function other ways. It just means like that's going to be the easiest way because that's the way you're already hardwired to move. So you just give yourself some extra wins right in the beginning.
And that's really like good stuff to know, because obviously, like, you know, my education is totally different from Tori's. Like, I've not learned what she has learned, but it's really good even for me to like learn that stuff too, because, you know, having someone who, you know, maybe graduates Tori exercises or, you know, is continuing to sprinkle them in, like from a programming perspective, what can I do to obviously like give you the best program possible and so it's like understanding that it's more unilateral movements is going to be more beneficial to the nervous system, to getting you back to being able to produce like a balanced, like heavier bilateral movement.
Right.
So no, that's really good.
And the other thing you can do, like, so we were talking about, I think this was when, I can't remember if you were getting shut out at this point. We were talking about usually using that sandwiching technique where you're kind of sandwiching the recovery work or the Tori. I think I keep calling it Tori exercise. It feels weird when I call them Tori exercise. But when you sandwich that with those bigger movements and you give yourself those check-in points, a lot of times that's all they need. It really depends on the person. Like, some people's nervous systems are going to be totally fine with that, and others, sorry, I keep putting my finger on the camera, and other people aren't. They're going to need smaller baby steps where they're actually, you know, shifting through function. I was one of those, I very much distrusted my knee when I got back into like more heavier nonsense. And so I was definitely one of those people that like, I used all the tricks to get myself through that. I sandwiched, I did contralateral and unilateral stuff, and I took forever, like a solid 2.5 years before I was like, okay, I think it's okay to squat now. Now that's excessive. But that also is what happens when, you know, you train with yourself and you don't have anybody helping you out. Like for me, I was much more concerned with, I don't want to get hurt again. And I've got way too much to do for me to be bumming around on like one leg. So like, let's do this as slow and steady as we can and make sure that like Tori's not going to get hurt again. And that to me meant I'm doing lots and lots of resets. I'm doing lots and lots of check-ins with my leg to see how it feels, make sure that it feels good. And then making sure that if I can lift that weight with one leg, meaning like I can do my unilateral movements, I can do my contralateral movements, and everything's fine, I should absolutely be able to produce that movement bilaterally. And like for me, that's what I needed mentally in order to do that and not have any squeamy feelings about it. But that's not everybody. So yeah, I mean, like, I hate to say it depends again, but it totally does.
I feel like that's the famous answer.
Exactly.
Well, it depends, because it depends on the person's injury, if they have an injury, and it depends where the injury is and everything like that too. So.
It depends too on like how seasoned are they in that particular activity, and whether or not that seasoning was done with a healthy mindset. That also depends. That makes a difference. If I am dealing with someone who has been powerlifting or strength training for, you know, a decade, but they had really, really poor mental habits in how they treated their body, how they looked at their body, how they looked at pain, how they looked at just working out in general, their nervous system's going to be a bit more finicky, most likely. And we're going to have to be much more careful about how intentional they are about things and how they feel about things. And it's gonna be a lot squishier, like mushy squishy than they
Not only
probably
dealing
want.
with the physical part,
Right.
it's all the mental battle from going to doing something like maybe CrossFit or strength training to then like doing more basic movements. So they're like, why are you doing this? Like type
Right.
sort of thing. Yeah.
Right. And then if I've got someone that's brand new and say like they're being introduced into the fitness world and like maybe they've always had chronic pain and we finally got them out of chronic pain and they're like, oh, let's do some things. Then I'm putting the brakes on, but at the same time, like I'm trying to let them explore and play as much as possible, because even if they get it wrong, it's going to be really easy to reset their nervous system. And it's more important that they play and learn what they like. Does that make sense? So like if they go too hard, if they try something that, you know, they end up getting like a pain from, or they end up having like a minor injury from, their nervous system is not set in that pattern. It's going to take a little bit of time to heal it. And then we're going to have learned something from the experience and we're going to go off and we're going to try something else, or we're going to tweak what we did and we're going to try it again. But their nervous system isn't going to be nearly as sensitive about things. And so they have that room to play and explore. It's kind of like, you kind of can treat them like a kid. You're going to dust them off. You're going to, you know, put the Band-Aid on their knee after they scuff it up, and you're going to send them back out to play. Like, you can do that with them because they don't have all that baggage. And, you know, and then you have your really rare birds where it's like they have great mental habits, they have great physical habits, they've been in the physical space for a long time, they take care of their bodies really, really well. They just have some mysterious pain they can't quite figure out. Those guys, it's usually, and I say usually, but like it's usually some other kind of added stressor that they don't think of as a stressor. And it usually has nothing to do with their actual workout routine, outside of when this is happening, you need to back off and give your body some time to rest, because whether or not you label this as stress, it's stress. And like those guys usually are okay going back to their regularly scheduled activities, with the addition of check in with your body on a regular basis, do the resets, and make sure that you're actually where you think you are. So it depends on the person. It's not, you know, it's not a set thing, but hopefully those guidelines made sense. I don't know.
No, I think it was definitely like helpful.
Okay, good.
Does anybody have anything else before we sign off for the night? All right. I don't think so. Okay. So Tori will be on second Monday of every month.
Yes.
Okay.
So second Monday of every month. Because I feel like the last time I talked about it, I think I might have said the first Monday of every month, and that's why the reminder went out like that. So that is my bad, but second Monday of every month, Tori will hop on. If you guys have questions, if not, we can kind of just like go with the flow of things as we did tonight. But yeah, thanks for jumping on, Tori.
Yeah, thanks for having me. This is fun.
Yeah.
We always love having you.
Yes.
All right. I'm going to go eat my dinner. So bye, guys.
Go eat your dinner, and we will talk to you guys later.
Sounds
All right.
good.
Good night.
Bye.
Thanks.
See ya.